Something leaked out of Microsoft that was never supposed to reach you. Not a product specification that a journalist pieced together from public filings and conference presentations. Not an educated guess from an industry analyst reading between the lines of earnings call language. Not a rumor assembled from anonymous sources whose credibility you have to take on faith. An actual internal document. A real planning artifact from inside Microsoft is Windows 12 development process that made its way out of the building, across the internet, and into the hands of people who understood exactly what they were reading and exactly why Microsoft needed the world never to see it. The document circulated through privacy research communities, technology forums, and developer networks within hours of its initial appearance. What the document revealed about Windows 12 is not what Microsoft has been telling you. It is not the story of AI-enhanced personal computing designed to empower users and respect their privacy that Satya Nadella has been delivering in keynotes and earnings calls and carefully staged media briefings. What it revealed is a product roadmap, a monetization architecture, and a data strategy that, when read without the marketing language that Microsoft's communications teams would wrap around it, describes something that hundreds of millions of Windows users would reject if they fully understood what they were being enrolled into. The reaction, when the contents became widely understood, was not the kind of contained tech community discussion that Microsoft can manage by waiting for the news cycle to move on. It was a global user revolt, coordinated, sustained, and still accelerating at the moment you're reading this. Users who had never been politically engaged about technology choices making public declarations. Enterprise customers opening emergency reviews of their Microsoft relationships. Developers who had built careers on Windows tooling announcing platform migrations. Regulators who had existing open inquiries about Microsoft's Windows privacy practices, receiving the leaked document as material evidence and treating it accordingly. Satya Nadella, the man who rebuilt Microsoft from the perception of a declining legacy technology company into one of the world's most valuable corporations, who turned Windows from a revenue source in terminal decline into a platform for cloud and AI services expansion, who positioned himself publicly as the thoughtful, principled face of responsible technology leadership, is now managing the largest simultaneous crisis of user trust, regulatory exposure, and commercial relationship damage in his tenure as Microsoft's chief executive. He is panicking. His executive team is panicking. And the document that started it reveals exactly why. The leaked document is a Windows 12 internal strategy planning artifact, dating from within the past 18 months of development. Its authenticity has been independently verified by multiple security researchers who examined its metadata, formatting and internal technical references against known Microsoft documentation standards, and found it consistent with genuine internal planning materials. Microsoft has neither confirmed nor denied its authenticity in direct terms, which is itself a form of confirmation, because a genuinely fabricated document of this significance would produce an immediate, unequivocal denial from a company with Microsoft's legal and communications resources. Careful non-denial is the response of an organization managing the fallout from something real. The document's most immediately explosive section covers what Microsoft internally describes as the continuous value extraction architecture of Windows 12. The language is corporate planning language, the kind that sounds analytical and neutral when read by the people who write it inside a company and sounds damning when read by the people whose relationship with the product it describes. The continuous value extraction architecture is a planning framework for how Windows 12 is designed to generate ongoing revenue from users across the full life cycle of their relationship with the operating system, not just at the point of device purchase. What the document describes as value extraction is what users would describe as being charged repeatedly for things they used to get once, being enrolled in data collection programs that benefit Microsoft's commercial interests, and having the capabilities of their operating system progressively tied to ongoing payment relationships, rather than one-time hardware purchases. The euphemistic corporate framing and the plain user-facing reality are separated by a gap so wide that reading them side by side is genuinely disorienting. The subscription architecture the document outlines is more aggressive than the tiered model that prior reporting had suggested was being planned. Earlier reporting indicated that Windows 12's full AI feature set would be gated behind a Microsoft 365 subscription, creating a two-tier experience where paying subscribers get the complete product and free tier users get a functional but limited version. That reporting was accurate as far as it went. The leaked document reveals it didn't go far enough. The internal planning architecture describes 3 tiers, not 2, with the boundaries between them designed to be experienced by users as a progressive degradation. when they are not on the highest subscription level, rather than a clean distinction between a clearly adequate free product and a clearly premium paid one. The experience architecture is explicitly designed around what behavioral economists call loss aversion. Users who experience the full Windows 12 capability set during the initial device setup period, and then encounter the reduced capability of a lower tier, feel a loss rather than simply recognizing an upgrade opportunity. That loss feeling is more motivating than the gain feeling of an upgrade pitch to someone who has never experienced the premium features. Microsoft's internal planning documents describe this mechanic with explicit reference to conversion optimization research, meaning they know exactly what psychological dynamic they are engineering, and they designed the tier structure deliberately to exploit it. The lowest tier, which Microsoft's public communications describe as the free Windows 12 experience, is described in internal planning language as the acquisition funnel entry point. The framing is not of a genuinely useful product that Microsoft offers as a service to users. The framing is of a limited experience designed to generate subscription conversions. Users on the free tier are not customers Microsoft is serving. They are prospects Microsoft is converting. The document's language about this is direct enough that its publication produced immediate and intense reactions from consumer advocates and technology journalists who read it as a confirmation of concerns they had previously been dismissed for raising. The data architecture section of the leaked document is where the regulatory consequences have been most severe and immediate. This section describes Windows 12's behavioral data collection infrastructure in terms that go substantially beyond what Microsoft's public privacy communications have ever acknowledged. The document describes a data collection scope that encompasses what it calls ambient behavioral intelligence, a term that refers to continuous, comprehensive monitoring of user computing behavior across all application contexts, communication patterns, file interaction histories, and network activity, compiled into longitudinal behavioral profiles that Microsoft's AI and advertising systems use across a range of commercial applications. The document explicitly references the commercial value of this behavioral intelligence to Microsoft's advertising business, to the developer ecosystem data marketplace that Microsoft is building, and to the AI model training pipeline that underlies Copilot and Microsoft's broader AI product strategy. When privacy regulators across multiple jurisdictions read this document, they were reading Microsoft's own internal characterization of their Windows user base as a behavioral data asset to be exploited for commercial purposes. They were reading explicit acknowledgement that behavioral data collected through the operating system feeds commercial applications, including advertising. The UK Information Commissioner's Office, which had open inquiries into Microsoft's Windows privacy practices before the leak, issued a formal statement within days of the document's publication indicating that its contents were being incorporated as material evidence into their existing investigation, and that the investigation's scope was being expanded in response to what the document revealed. ICO formal statements of this nature are not routine communications. The board's preliminary communication characterized the document's description of Windows users as a behavioral data asset for commercial exploitation, as raising fundamental questions about whether Microsoft's data processing practices have any viable lawful basis under GDPR. Raising fundamental questions about lawful basis at the European Data Protection Board level is the regulatory equivalent of a company's legal team being told the prosecution has evidence that changes the character of the entire case. It is not a routine challenge to be managed through existing compliance frameworks. It is a foundational threat to the data processing model that Windows 12 is being built around. Germany's Federal Commissioner for Data Protection issued the most direct national authority statement, describing the leaked document's contents as appearing to confirm systematic and deliberate exploitation of Windows users' behavioral data for commercial purposes in ways fundamentally incompatible with German and European data protection law. The Commissioner's statement included language indicating that immediate remedial action by Microsoft would not be sufficient to address the regulatory concerns the document raises, and that structural examination of Microsoft's data processing architecture would be required. Structural examination by a data protection authority is the precursor to mandatory architecture changes, ongoing compliance obligations, and the kind of enforcement action that imposes lasting operational constraints on a company's data practices. In the United States, the FTC's Technology Enforcement Division received the leaked document through multiple submission channels, including direct submissions from privacy advocacy organizations, referrals from congressional offices that had been briefed on its contents, and proactive disclosure by security researchers who had verified its authenticity. The FTC's existing open matters related to Microsoft's privacy practices were immediately elevated in priority status. Congressional offices that had been pressing the FTC for stronger technology privacy enforcement used the document as a concrete exhibit in communications, arguing for accelerated action. The bipartisan nature of the congressional response, with members from both parties citing the document in critical statements about Microsoft, signals a political environment for FTC enforcement that is more supportive than any Microsoft has faced since the antitrust era of the late 1990s. The enterprise customer response began within hours of the document's publication and has continued to escalate in the weeks since. The specific language in the document describing Windows users as a behavioral data asset, combined with the explicit acknowledgement that behavioral data flows into commercial applications, including advertising, created an immediate legal problem for enterprise customers in regulated industries. Their legal teams began asking the same question simultaneously across thousands of organizations. If Microsoft's own internal planning documents characterize Windows user behavioral data as a commercial asset to be exploited, what does that characterization mean for enterprises whose employees use Windows machines and whose regulatory obligations require them to control how employee and customer data is processed? The answer their legal teams are providing is not comfortable for Microsoft's enterprise relationships. Healthcare organizations, subject to HIPAA, whose employees use Windows machines to access patient data, are examining whether Windows 12's behavioral data collection architecture, as described in the leaked document, creates compliance exposure they are legally required to remediate. Law firms where attorney-client privilege extends to the computing environment in which privileged communications are created are evaluating whether Windows 12's ambient behavioral intelligence architecture is compatible with their professional obligations. Financial institutions, subject to banking regulations, governing data sovereignty and access control, are assessing whether an operating system whose internal planning explicitly frames user behavioral data as a commercial asset can be deployed in compliant configurations. These are not hypothetical concerns being raised by privacy advocates in bad faith. These are specific legal questions being asked by compliance departments, answered by legal teams, and in some cases escalated to regulatory bodies for guidance. The enterprise legal response to the leaked document represents a level of scrutiny of Microsoft's data practices that previous advocacy and journalism had been unable to generate because it lacked the concrete internal documentation that the leak provided. Corporate legal teams respond differently to a journalist's characterization of a company's data practices than they respond to that company's own internal planning documents describing its practices in commercial exploitation language. Microsoft's crisis communications response to the leak has been among the most challenging communications management situations the company has faced in the Nadella era. The fundamental problem confronting Microsoft's communications team is that the standard crisis response playbook, which involves emphasizing commitment to user privacy, highlighting available controls, referencing compliance with applicable regulations, and promising to do better, cannot be executed in response to a document that explicitly describes Microsoft's own internal planning priorities in terms that contradict all of those commitments. You cannot issue a statement emphasizing your commitment to user privacy while a document bearing your organization's internal formatting and referencing your internal planning processes describes your users as a behavioral data asset to be commercially exploited. You cannot reference available user controls as evidence of your respect for user autonomy while the document in question describes those controls as designed to exist at a level that satisfies regulatory minimum requirements without significantly impacting the behavioral data collection that your commercial model depends on, but a deliberately designed architecture chosen for specific commercial reasons after explicit analysis of the alternatives. Emphasize Microsoft's historical commitment to privacy and user trust, describe the document as not representative of final product decisions, and promise an internal review of the practices it describes. Privacy researchers and regulatory lawyers who have analyzed these statements note that none of them constitute a denial of the document's authenticity, and none of them commit to specific changes in the practices the document describes. The communications are designed to be quotable in coverage that might otherwise be exclusively negative while committing Microsoft to as little as possible. Satya Nadella's personal silence on the document has been notable. A chief executive who is comfortable speaking publicly about Microsoft's AI ambitions, its responsible technology commitments, and its vision for empowering users has not personally and directly addressed the leaked document and its contents. His absence from the direct response represents either a deliberate communication strategy of keeping the chief executive above the crisis, or a genuine uncertainty about how to publicly address a document that, if authenticated, contradicts the principled technology leadership narrative that is central to his public identity. The developer community response has added a dimension to the revolt that goes beyond consumer and enterprise user reactions. Developers who build applications on Windows platforms, who have invested years and careers in the Windows application ecosystem, who have built businesses around the assumption that Windows is a stable platform with a certain relationship between developer, user, and operating system, have been reacting to the leaked document with a combination of alarm and betrayal that is producing concrete migration decisions. The developer data marketplace described in the leaked document, where Microsoft aggregates behavioral data about how users interact with applications and makes that data available to other developers through an API, is experienced by developer communities not just as a privacy violation against users, but as a competitive intelligence violation against developers themselves. The behavioral data about how users interact with a developer's application, including what features they use, how they navigate, what they accomplish, and where they encounter friction, is among the most commercially valuable information that developer possesses for improving and monetizing that application. A platform that collects that behavioral data and distributes it through an API to other developers, potentially including competing applications, is a platform that is actively undermining the competitive interests of the developers who build on it. Developer forums and communities have been processing this implication with an intensity that suggests it may produce lasting changes in platform development decisions. Open source communities have accelerated work on Windows application compatibility layers for Linux. Cross-platform development framework communities have seen increased interest from developers who had previously focused exclusively on Windows. The developer trust in Windows as a stable, developer-aligned platform is eroding in ways that, if sustained, will affect the application ecosystem that is one of Windows' most important competitive advantages over alternative platforms. The Linux migration that was already accelerating before the leaked document has received what observers are describing as the single largest boost in platform defection motivation since the movement began gaining mainstream momentum. Communities dedicated to helping Windows users switch to Linux have seen membership and activity growth rates that exceed anything their administrators had previously experienced. The growth is not concentrated in the technically sophisticated user categories that have historically dominated Linux communities. It includes ordinary Windows users who saw coverage of the leaked document, understood its implications at a human level without needing to parse technical details, and made decisions that they describe in their own forum posts as feeling like finally having a reason that justified the switching effort. The posts from new migrants in the weeks following the leak's publication share a specific emotional quality that distinguishes them from earlier migration posts. Earlier, migrants often described pragmatic motivations, specific Windows frustrations reaching a threshold, a particular feature that Linux offered that Windows lacked, a hardware compatibility situation that made Windows untenable. The migration posts, following the leak, describe something closer to a value alignment decision, a recognition that the relationship between user and operating system that the leaked document describes is a relationship they are not willing to participate in, and that the effort of switching platforms is worth what it costs in transition friction because the alternative is knowingly participating in a data arrangement whose terms they find unacceptable. That qualitative shift in migration motivation matters because it signals a different kind of departure than pragmatic frustration-driven switching. Users who leave because of specific Windows problems can potentially be brought back by fixing those problems. Users who leave because of a fundamental disagreement with the commercial relationship that their operating system is designed to impose on them are not retrievable by feature updates or improved battery life or better privacy settings menus. They have made a values-based platform decision, and values-based decisions have a durability that frustration-based decisions do not. What you need to do right now, given everything the leaked document has revealed about where Windows is heading, starts with examining your own dependency on the Windows ecosystem, with more honesty than most users have previously applied to that examination. The migration to Windows 12 is not an upgrade in the way that previous Windows version transitions were upgrades. It is an enrollment in a commercial relationship whose terms the leaked document describes in language Microsoft never intended you to read. Audit your Microsoft account's current data collection scope by visiting Microsoft's privacy dashboard at privacy.microsoft.com. Review what behavioral data Microsoft currently holds about your Windows usage, your search activity, your location history, and your Cortana and voice activity. Download the available data exports and examine what Microsoft's current collection looks like before Windows 12 adds the ambient behavioral intelligence architecture the leaked document describes. Examine your hardware against Windows 12's known requirements now, while you have time to make a deliberate decision about your next computer purchase without the pressure of Microsoft's launch event marketing environment surrounding that decision. If your current machine will not meet Windows 12's hardware thresholds, your next device purchase is a platform decision as much as a hardware decision. Making it with the full information the leaked document provides is making it on your terms rather than Microsoft's. Take the Linux option seriously at a practical level rather than a theoretical one. Install a Linux distribution in a virtual machine alongside your current Windows installation and spend 2 weeks genuinely using it for your normal workloads. Not as a test of whether Linux is perfect, as a realistic assessment of whether the gap between Linux's current capabilities and Windows' current capabilities is smaller than the gap between what you want your operating system relationship to look like and what the leaked document reveals Windows 12's relationship is designed to be, because that comparison is the one that matters, not Linux versus Windows on features. Your values versus Microsoft's commercial architecture on fundamental questions about who your operating system serves and what it does with your computing life. The document leaked. The revolt is real and it is growing. Satya Nadella is managing a crisis that his company's own internal language created. You are reading this while there is still time to make a deliberate choice rather than inheriting one Microsoft made for you. The question the leaked document forces every Windows user to answer is simple and important. Knowing what Microsoft's own internal planning documents say about what Windows 12 is designed to do with your behavioral data, with your computing patterns, with your digital life accumulated across years of using a machine you thought was yours, do you still want to be a Windows user? That question deserves an honest answer, not the answer Microsoft's launch event will try to give you, yours.